Well, the sun is shining, there's snow on the ground, the wind chills are well below zero, the Packers are in the playoffs. I pulled out the green and gold vestments from the back of the closet, and life just feels exactly the way it was meant to be. Let us bask in the wonder in the midst of chaos and everything else in the world. Let's find joy in the reality that right here on this day, things are really the way God created them to be. We are conditioned when people approach us and ask us to do them a favor to respond with, "What is it?" And when our children come and ask us a favor, we are conditioned to respond with, "How much?" And then, "What for?" And it's not that we don't want to help the people who come to us. Of course we do. We want to help. We want to be there. We want to support them. We want to serve them. We love them. But we want to hedge our bets a little bit. We want to know what we're getting into. We want to understand what's going to be asked of us, what we're signing up for, what resources and time will be required. And once in a while, when someone comes forward, and it happens, and they say, "I'm going to ask you to do something for me, but I want you to say yes before I tell you what it is," the red flags go up and the alarms go off. And when in those instances we find the courage to say, "Okay, yes," without knowing what they're going to ask of us, that is an expression of true faith and trust in the other person. That is a sign of love, a willingness to be vulnerable, and to just say, "Yes, I will do what you ask even before I know what it is." And it's scary. And yet, that's exactly what we do when we stand in the sanctuary of the church and get married. We look at another person and we say, "Yes. Yes, I will walk with you. Yes, I will companion you. Yes, I will stand by you and journey with you no matter what," because the reality is we don't know what we're signing up for. We don't know what lies ahead, but love says, say yes, even without knowing. And the same is true of ordination, right? I mean, you don't know it. If I knew today, 18 years ago, what ordination would mean, I'd still be standing here. I love you. And love says yes, no matter what. About 12 or 13 years ago, I was doing a wedding for a couple, and these two individuals could not have been more opposite of one another. This young man was very quiet and reserved, somewhat shy. He had a banker's haircut. All of his shirts had collars and were always tucked in. And the woman he was marrying was 180 degrees opposite. She was very outgoing and loved to have a good time and party. And every time I met with them, including on their wedding day, she was covered in more tattoos than fabric. And then at the rehearsal the night before, the grandmother of the groom took me aside, cornered me. She was a little nervous and said, "Now, you've prepared them for marriage, haven't you? He knows what he's getting into. Tell me you've prepared him." And I took a breath and said, "I've been married 26 years. And if I've learned anything, it's that there's no way you can be prepared for marriage. Because you can't. You don't know when you say yes what lies ahead. You don't know what's going to come. I ran into that same couple 5 years later at the Home Depot. And they hadn't changed, except they were expecting their second child and had just bought a house and were looking at sink traps. And when two people can stand holding hands in the plumbing aisle, that's love. They said yes, and they lived it. And they didn't know what was coming their way. I love these stories. I love this story of Samuel being called. He jumps up and comes running and says, yes, here I am, without knowing why he's called or really even who's calling him. He just says yes. And the same is true of the call of the disciples in John's gospel with Peter and Andrew. And Jesus, they ask, where are you going? And he says, well, find out. And they say, okay, and off they go. They don't know, and yet they follow. Yet they say yes. And we know how the story unfolds. They didn't. There was no way they could have anticipated the anguish and the pain, the struggles, the fear, the anxiety that journey would take them on, or the rewards and the joy and the sense of deep meaning and profound purpose. They didn't know, but they said yes without knowing. And that brings us, to you, to me. We're all called, and we've all heard it, just as surely as they did, and we know it. When we sit alone in the quiet of our own prayer and contemplation, and we hear the whispers, we hear the inner nudging of the Spirit calling to us. And we want to know why. We want to know what it involves. We want to know what we're signing up for. What's it going to take? What are you requiring? What are you asking? But we don't get to know, just like those disciples. The question is, will we say yes without knowing? Because that's what love does. Love says yes in faith, in vulnerability, in trust. Will we say yes, even when we don't know what's going to be required? It's a big ask. It is a soul-stretching ask. It is love. And may the soul-stretching love of Christ rain down upon you. And may that soul-stretching love of Christ stir the heart within you. And may that soul-stretching love of Christ call forth and draw you into the world.